Corporal Ethan Voss had faced plasma fire, orbital bombardments, and bureaucratic hellscapes, but nothing tested his patience like alien diplomacy. He stood at attention near the back wall of the Cathari Grand Assembly Hall, trying not to shift his weight. The air was thick with floral pheromones and incense, and the constant hum of the alien life support system was just shrill enough to drive a man mad. In front of him, dozens of Cathari nobles floated in dignified stillness, their shimmering exoskeletons reflecting the iridescent blue of the chamber walls. A few human envoys were interspersed among them, looking just as lost and mildly terrified as he felt. At the head of the hall, on a raised dais, sat Queen Seraxa Val'karn, ruler of the Cathari Empire, warlord of the Orion Fringe, and supposedly, according to Earth's intelligence files, allergic to informal speech. She was a magnificent creature, tall and statuesque, with 6 delicate limbs folded like a sculpture and a crown of bioluminescent filaments pulsing in shades of lavender. She had not moved once in over an hour. Ethan was on the verge of passing out from sheer tedium when the human diplomat beside him leaned over and whispered, "She hasn't blinked in 40 minutes. Can she even blink?" Ethan gave a tight-lipped smirk. "She doesn't need to. She has underlings to blink for her." The diplomat almost snorted, but caught himself. Humor was risky here. Ethan, on the other hand, had already hit his limit. From the breast pocket of his uniform, he retrieved a folded scrap of old-fashioned paper. He'd brought it as a curiosity, something to show the alien techs who had never seen non-digital media. Instead, he pulled out a pen, scribbled a line, and stared at the note. "You look like you could use a break from these windbags." It was stupid, reckless, even. But the Cathari prize ceremony so much they probably wouldn't even recognize it as disrespect. He could play it off as a human gesture, a diplomatic quirk. Worst-case scenario, he'd get chewed out. Best-case scenario, a chuckle. Maybe. Heart thudding with the kind of adrenaline you didn't get in combat. Ethan folded the paper again and looked for an opportunity. A servant passed nearby with a tray of scented oils. Cathari didn't use paper, but they were highly ritualistic. The servant might assume it was some kind of human offering. Ethan slipped the note onto the tray with a practiced sleight of hand. The tray ascended the room on gentle repulsor lifts, gliding through the shifting air until it reached the dais. The queen did not look down, but one of her secondary arms extended with terrifying grace and plucked the folded note from the tray. She held it in her clawed fingers for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she unfolded it. The chamber was silent. Seraxa read the note. Her facial expression was unreadable to humans. Her species conveyed emotion through the color of their frill membranes and the oscillation of their breath sacs. But something shifted. Subtle. Real. Then she stood. Every diplomat in the room froze. Without a word, Queen Seraxa descended the dais and swept silently out of the hall, her attendants scrambling after her like confused insects. Ethan blinked. The diplomats looked around in stunned silence. One of the Cathari liaisons clicked nervously and said, in broken English, "This is not normal." No one moved. No one dared to ask. Ethan remained at his post, trying not to sweat. Had he just insulted a galactic monarch? Had he ignited a diplomatic crisis over a joke? He didn't know. But deep in the folds of her many sleeves, the queen still held the note, the summons. Ethan Voss was halfway through a disciplinary debrief when the summons came. Major Lyle was mid-rant, something about diplomatic decorum and the 10,000 things Ethan had no business doing, when a shimmering Cathari envoy entered the room, escorted by 2 of their honor guards. The honored Queen Seraxa Val'karn, the envoy intoned, his frilled crest quivering, requests the immediate presence of Corporal Ethan Voss in her private chambers. Lyle froze. His mouth opened, then closed. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say private?" "The queen does not repeat requests," the envoy said smoothly. "This is a great honor." Lyle muttered, "or a last meal." 10 minutes later, Ethan stood in front of a set of towering hexagonal doors, heart pounding in a way even battlefield drops couldn't replicate. The queen's private chamber was off-limits to all non-Cathari, until now. 2 guards opened the doors without a word. He stepped into the sanctum. The room was cavernous and strangely organic, as if grown rather than built. Light pulsed from crystalline nodes embedded in the walls. Silken drapes floated through the air like jellyfish. The air was warmer, denser, laced with something like lavender and static electricity. At the far end, Queen Seraxa stood alone. No attendants, no guards. Ethan saluted instinctively. "Your Majesty." She turned slowly, regarding him with unblinking golden eyes. Her frills were tinted a soft indigo, a hue Ethan didn't recognize from the diplomatic briefings. "You wrote me something," she said, voice calm and resonant, spoken in flawless English. Ethan hesitated. "Yes, a note." Her secondary arms folded across her chest. "No one has written to me in many years. My species abandoned the act of handwriting long ago. Communication is telepathic or encoded. Efficient. Cold. I figured that," Ethan said. "Guess I wanted to see what would happen." "And what did you expect?" "I expected to be arrested. Or vaporized. Or both." For a moment, silence. Then, an unmistakable sound. A low, vibrating chuff that traveled up from her thorax. She was laughing. The sound was utterly alien, but unmistakable. Ethan stared. "You are not what I expected from a human soldier," she said, moving closer. "Most of your diplomats speak in scripted tones. Every word weighed. Your note, it was unfiltered, spontaneous." "It was stupid," he said. "Just a joke." "It was honest," Seraxa countered. "That is rare in my world." She extended one hand, clawed but elegant, and held up the piece of paper. She had folded it with surprising care, the creases crisp. "This object," she said, "is a relic of a species still willing to indulge emotion over strategy." You reached across the formality and offered what? Amusement, maybe humanity, something unprocessed. Seraxa stared at him for a long time. "Do you know why Kthari rulers isolate themselves? Why we speak through intermediaries and rarely allow contact?" "I've read the briefings. Something about emotional contamination. A poetic way of saying our rule depends on perception. Fear, stability. Emotion is chaos. But your note has caused a disturbance I did not expect." Her tone had shifted. There was a vulnerability underneath the regal cadence. "I didn't mean to disrupt anything." "You did," she said. "And yet, I find myself curious. I want another." "Another what?" "Note." Ethan blinked. "You want me to write you a second note?" "Yes." He hesitated, then pulled a small notepad from his pocket. It was a habit, a leftover from old soldier days, jotting things down when power was scarce. He scribbled something quickly and handed it to her. Seraxa read it in silence. "If power makes you lonely, maybe you need a little rebellion." The queen looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. But her frills glowed faint violet, a color that, according to his briefings, denoted contemplation. "You are a dangerous man, Corporal Voss. I've been called worse." She looked down at the note again. "I will contact you when I want another." Dismissed. Ethan nodded and turned to leave, heart hammering. Before the doors closed behind him, she spoke again. "And, Corporal?" He looked back. "Next time, don't wait for permission. Words as weapons." The third note said, "Diplomacy is just flirting with a war budget." Ethan wasn't sure why he wrote that one. Maybe to see if Queen Seraxa had a sense of humor beyond polite interest. Maybe to test the line between entertainment and insult. But when he handed it to her during their next meeting, she paused, read it twice, and let out that strange, vibrating laugh again. It became a ritual. Every few days, a Kthari envoy would appear and summon Ethan, not to the throne room, but to Seraxa's private chambers. No guards, no witnesses, just the queen, the soldier, and a growing stack of handwritten notes. Some were sarcastic, some philosophical. One had been a drawing of a cat wearing a crown. To his surprise, Seraxa had asked what it meant. "It's called a meme," Ethan explained. "On Earth, we use them to deal with existential dread." She had stared at the drawing for a long time. "Your species truly is absurd," she said. "You say that like it's a bad thing. I say that like it's a warning." The queen was changing, and others noticed. Ethan began to see it in subtle shifts. Seraxa spoke more openly in council meetings. Her formal addresses contained hints of metaphor, something unheard of in Kthari court speech. Her frills occasionally pulsed with colors of curiosity or amusement during public appearances. And once, only once, she made a joke. The chamber had gone deathly silent. By the time Ethan realized what was happening, rumors were spreading. Human influence, contamination, weakness. It came to a head when an assassination attempt nearly succeeded. He'd been walking back to his quarters when a servant, a shapeshifter in disguise, lunged at him with a monomolecular blade. If not for Seraxa's personal guards appearing from nowhere, Ethan would have been dead. He spent 3 hours in Med Bay and another 2 in quarantine, while Seraxa's security ran full biological scans. When he was finally cleared, he found her waiting. "You almost died," she said, voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. "Yeah, well, occupational hazard. I warned you. This world is not kind to those who unsettle it." Ethan leaned back against the wall. "Then why keep me around?" Seraxa's eyes flared. "Because I need to remember what it feels like not to be a symbol." Silence stretched between them. Outside her chambers, the court whispered about the human weapon, some calling him her pet, others calling him her downfall. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "The notes. All of it." He thought for a long moment. "No, and neither do you." Her frills shifted, pink then violet. "My counsel wants you removed," she said. "They say you are compromising my judgment." "I am." She didn't deny it. "I've written war orders, diplomatic protocols, interstellar decrees," she continued. "Every word precise, measured, predictable. But your notes? They're messy. They make me feel. Is that so bad? For a queen? It is dangerous." Ethan reached into his jacket and handed her another note. She unfolded it slowly. "Revolutions don't always begin with speeches. Sometimes they begin with paper." She closed the note carefully and looked up. "I cannot protect you as an outsider. Then make me an insider." Her frills stilled. "Explain. Give me a title. Something diplomatic. A role that legitimizes our conversations." Seraxa considered it. "Cultural attaché." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "You just made that up." "I'm the queen. I make everything up." The next day, a royal proclamation was issued. Corporal Ethan Voss of the Terran Peace Force was formally designated as intercultural liaison to the Kthari throne. The position didn't exist before. It barely existed now, but it gave them cover. And for the first time in years, the Kthari throne saw something it hadn't seen since the war. Change, not through violence, not through invasion, but through notes. And now, they both knew words could be more dangerous than any weapon Ethan had ever carried. The final note. The tribunal convened in silence. Ethan stood in the center of a towering chamber shaped like a crystal bloom, the walls echoing every breath, every footstep. Seated in a half-circle above him were 12 of the Kthari high nobles, elders whose frills were pale with age and whose eyes bore the gleam of practiced politics. They had called this emergency session under the pretense of evaluating Queen Seraxa's mental stability. Everyone knew the real reason. Him. Behind and slightly above him sat the queen herself, elevated on her hovering throne. She was composed, unreadable, frills a disciplined slate gray. Not a flicker of color. The lead noble, Ericstow, conservative to the core and allergic to human improvisation, spoke first. "We do not question Her Majesty's authority. We question the influence upon it." He turned his gaze to Ethan. "Corporal Voss, you have engaged the Queen in unmonitored, unsanctioned exchanges. You've introduced foreign concepts, humor, sentimentality, disorder. Do you deny this?" Ethan took a breath. "No, I did all of that." Gasps echoed through the gallery. Seraxa remained still. Eric sneered. "And do you defend this contamination?" Ethan pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, the very last one he'd written. His hand didn't tremble, though his heart pounded loud enough to fill the chamber. "I don't have a speech," he said. "Just this." He unfolded the note. "Power without emotion is tyranny. Emotion without courage is silence. I gave her words. She chose what to do with them." He looked directly at the nobles. You're afraid because she started to feel, but she's not weaker. She's awake, and that terrifies you. Whispers buzzed across the hall. One noble hissed, "You presume too much, human." "I'm not presuming anything," Ethan said calmly. "She summoned me. She read every note. She laughed. She chose." A second noble stood. "And what if this emotional deviation leads to instability? To collapse?" Seraxa's voice rang out like a blade slicing through silk. "Then it is my collapse to command." All heads turned. She descended from the throne platform, standing beside Ethan, her frills blooming with a luminous, defiant indigo. "For cycles, I have ruled through control," she said. "I've kept my mind sealed, my will precise, my heart closed. And what has it brought? Fear, stagnation." She gestured toward Ethan. "This human reminded me that rulers must be more than symbols, that the soul of an empire lies not in its silence, but in its ability to listen, to change, to feel." Eric's stepped forward. "You would risk civil unrest for this man's jokes and scribbles?" Serax's eyes narrowed. "I would risk it for truth." She turned to the central dais and raised her voice in the old dialect, a ceremonial register used in decades. "I invoke the right of renewal." Shock rippled through the nobles. "The right?" One of them whispered. "That hasn't been used since." "It is still law," she said. "And under it, I reaffirm my sovereign judgment, unbound by council consensus." She extended one arm toward Ethan. Ethan Voss stepped forward. He did, unsure of what ancient right he was walking into. "You're not just a soldier or a liaison. You're a reminder of chaos, of courage, of life. Will you accept a permanent role as voice between our peoples?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." The Queen's frills shifted, calm now, resolute. "It is done." And just like that, the tribunal was over. Later, in her private chamber, silence hung thick. Ethan sat on a low bench, still processing what had just happened. Seraxa approached, holding something in one hand, a folded piece of paper. He raised an eyebrow. "You wrote me a note?" "I did," she said, handing it over. The paper was thick, old-fashioned, elegant script. Her first attempt at Terran handwriting traced the surface in a slanted curl. He unfolded it. "You move." Ethan smiled. "So, we're doing this now." Seraxa's frills shifted into a warm coral. "We've already started."